In this video, we'll cover red flags that can be indicators of a phishing, spam, or otherwise malicious email, but from an analyst or engineer perspective. So when we're working with emails, we already reviewed the red flags from end user perspective, and that's looking into the content that's visible to the end user. The subject field, the content of the message, the from, to, reply to, the hyperlinks, attachments, the date, the time that it was sent, and so on. In this scenario, we'll focus more on the email headers and how to get those headers. The email headers tell us the actual life cycle of the email, from where it was sent, how it was processed, who actually received it. And with this, we can actually depict the story of the email. Where did it really come from? Is the the actual from address the same as the intended recipient or reply to? And we can use different indicators to make that determination. So from the analyst perspective, we're going to look into the behind the scenes. What are some of the fields that we need to pay close attention to? Well, there isn't one field that will give us 100% confidence that a particular email is malicious. Sometimes we have to look into multiple fields and kind of weigh in what are the indicators. Are we leaning more towards malicious or non-malicious? And to build that level of confidence, we'll look into the following indicators. So we're looking with starting with the email header. So the first thing we're going to do is, in addition to looking into what's visible to the end user, we're going to pull the email header. The email header gives us that conversation. So in the provided example here, we have a saved message. You can, in a particular example, we are using Outlook as the client interfacing with Office 365 online email gateway. So in a particular example, what we can do is opening a message is not necessarily a bad thing. We want the users to open the message and view the content. What we don't want the users to do is respond to the message, click on any links, open attachment, and enable content within the attachment. We want the users to make an educated decision, and that would require us sometimes to actually open the message. We're looking into this particular example. We discussed that ext for within our organization indicates external email, and obviously this is an external email. It's coming from Equifax, or so we think. This particular scenario is very relevant because the Equifax breach happened not too long ago. At the time of recording this video, this is a relevant topic. So looking into the content of this message, we see that obviously there's a hyperlink, there's a link like this, but sometimes they can be very creative. And again, this is analyst perspective. So we need to give our users a little bit more insight of what actually happened. So how do we get the header? So even if we're getting a message that has been saved in a .msg format, we can open it up just like this, go into File, Properties, looking into the Internet headers, and get the Internet headers. So with this, what we can do is we can copy those headers, and then we can go to a resource that can help us analyze them. So navigating to this resource, one of them is actually Microsoft's Message Analyzer. So let's resize the link, resize the window here so we can see the actual link. So this is the test connectivity Microsoft.com, and it's the message header analyzer utility. So what we're doing is we are copying the raw header that we extracted, Click Analyze, and now this tells us a story. Okay, there are different fields, and what are the fields that are of particular interest to us? Well, they're in this study guide. So we look into the, obtain the actual message header, which we've done, and here are the different utilities that we can use for analyzing the header. So some of the areas we're looking for is the X originating IP. Is the IP belong to the organization? Sometimes if an email is sent from home using online service like Office 365, that may not be a good validation, but sometimes it can be an indicator. So if the email supposedly is coming from, let's say, Amazon, okay, well, Amazon, you expect that they'll use an Amazon server, something within the Amazon network to send that email, especially if it's an automated delivery package or whatever the case. And if the originating IP is different or private IP address, either they were sent from home, that's not a relevant check, or it's a red flag indicating that the sender from was spoofed. The X authenticated user. Well, is the user who supposedly sent the message authenticated against the domain and able to send on behalf of the domain? If they were not, well, maybe there's an open relay. An open relay would indicate that anyone, anonymous user, can actually connect to the simple message transfer protocol email gateway and send email to anyone impersonating that domain. So OpenDNS or OpenSMTP relays are a big problem. They're not as prevalent today as they were perhaps 10 years ago. Xmailer, that's another field. The Xmailer sometimes can be helpful to determine whether or not email was sent in bulk. Typically, bulk is a spam indicator, targeted message, phishing campaign, and so on. It's not a 100% marker because sometimes illegitimate scripts are being used to distribute email. If you have a distribution list, if you sign up for news and stuff like this, the email can be sent through an automated response, but sometimes can be a good indicator. And one of the things we're looking for is a sent from Outlook client or PHP mailer. Now, again, the X mailer can be spoofed, so it's not 100%, but it can be an indicator. Reviewing the message body, especially if it's an HTML document, if you right-click within the body of the message, you can view the source. Viewing the source can reveal things like hyperlink references, the actual destination within a hyperlink, the H reference for an image, the actual storage location for the image. And sometimes if we compare them against the IP of the domain this is originating from, or the range of IP addresses for the domain, if those don't match, that can be a red flag. We're using within Office 365 environments, you have advanced threat protection. Advanced threat protection provides safe links as well as safe attachments. Safe links rewrites the URLs, so when a user clicks on potentially malicious URL, if Microsoft is aware of this website as being malicious, will flag the end user by displaying a warning message before the end user proceeds. Safe attachments, every attachment is detonated, inspected for malicious content like macros, and then the user actually can open it if it's determined to be safe. None of these are 100% bulletproof, but there are some indicators. So looking into this particular email header, SOP equals 1, that means that it's likely the ATP for Office 365 detected some type of malicious activity, and it's a good perhaps indicator that the message has some malicious content. The anti-spam message headers, well, looking for a particular example, and that's the X Microsoft anti-spam. This is a very specific example within if you're using Office 365, okay? So it has a phishing confidence level, PCL, and it has different values. If you're looking into the values, well, if it's from 0 to 3, it's not likely to be phishing. But if it's 4 to 8, likely to be phishing. So the higher the number, the more likelihood, the higher the likelihood that it's malicious. Also looking into the bulk complaint level. So I believe that Google uses a similar system. Microsoft in this example is using, again, a value. And what the bulk complaint level is measuring is how many complaints were received against the domain. Are they known for distributing spam campaigns, phishing campaigns? The more reports Microsoft receive with respect to the bulk complaint level, so more people report email from the domain as malicious, the score is calculated accordingly. So a 0, it's pretty good degree of confidence that it's not from a bulk sender. If it's 8 or 9, good indicator that it was. X forefront anti-spam report, that's another indicator, and there are different values that we can pay attention to. The IPv and NLI, it was not listed on any reputation list, which can be a good or bad. Either the domain is new, or it was there wasn't necessarily any malicious information. SMV, SPM, well, it was marked by the content filter of the email gateway you're using, Office 365, Yahoo, Google, whatever, as potentially, spam. And then you have the spam confidence level itself. Again, different values. So non-spam coming from a safe sender, safe recipient, or safe listed IP address, so trusted partner. 0 to 1 non-spam, above 5 is spam, and really high confidence spam when it's between 7 and 9. Anti-spoofing. So the indicators in there that we're looking at is the message ID. Does it really equal the from and the reply to header? The SMTP mail from. So this is the actual reverse path, where actually, the email originated from the actual server. The header from, it's easily spoofed. Reply to is, when you reply, does it match it, the actual header from. Received, who's the recipient? MS Exchange Organization authenticate as. Well, if you see as anonymous, either it was an open email relay server, or it was an indicator of a spoofed source. Undelivered mail returned to sender. So this is an indicator that you can be looking into, typically in the spam folder or the send or inbox. And what happens when somebody spoofs legitimate user's address is you're going to have these undelivered mail returned to sender. So somebody sent email on behalf of my account. What's going to happen is, because my account was spoofed, you got to reply to somebody, right? And typically, you're going to have a bounce back, or somebody's going to email and said, you're sending unsolicited messages. Why are you doing that? So look for these undelivered mail return to sender messages, and emails from other users indicating that your address is spamming or distributing phishing campaigns. Those are indicators of spoofing. Authentication result message header. So what's happening is we can determine if a particular organization is authorizing somebody else to send an email on their behalf. And this is typically done with recruiting campaigns, with marketing campaigns. 3 areas we're looking is the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. SPF is a very interesting field. What it does is tells us who is authorized to send email on behalf of the domain. So on behalf of our organization, Google is authorized to send email, as well as Microsoft. So if we check the SPF record, we see that Google and Microsoft are authorized. Well, the SPF should be passed. Now, if we see that the SPF failed, somebody perhaps tried to impersonate the organization. or they're not, on the authorized list of the sender. So that's an indicator of potential spoofing. The DKIM, digital signatures. Okay, so with the DKIM, it's signing that particular sender is who they say they are. Now, this can be spoofed if you have the key, but it can be a good indicator. Again, with the fail, red flag, with the pass, that's probably a good indicator signature was verified, but again, not 100%. The DMARC check, in order to have DMARC, you need to have the SPF and DKIM enabled and properly configured. With the DMARC, what we're doing is, again, determining if something is good, bad, or, 50-50 chance that it was. We're looking for the pass fail or the best guess. So what's happening here is also we're looking into message trace. So within Office 365 or the Google business apps, you can actually run a trace on the email and find out who actually else received the email. So was it a targeted campaign? Is the same email present, on several inboxes? Was the sender also sending other messages to users within the organization? That can be a helpful indicator. And then obviously you have the open source intelligence gathering. And these are different resources that can be used to determine if the particular email was malicious, or any of the indicators within the email can point to malicious activity. The central ops domain dossier provides the network who is, the domain who is. The network tools through MX Toolbox provides a record of looking up the SPF, DMARC, DKIM. RobTex can do a picture of interconnected IP addresses, kind of the network layout. The risk IQ, the threat crowd, and URLs can provide information about the domain, reputation of the domain, and they have the ability to scan actual websites for malicious content. URL void, again, another reputation site. So with this in mind, there are different indicators, and all these indicators we look through and we determine whether or not something is malicious from an analyst perspective. Let's see what that looks like. So if we were to look into a particular example, we saw the Equifax, right? So with the Equifax, we drew a particular attention. We look into the subject, and it's official data breach. Emails coming from the alert equifaxnotification.com. So if you were to go in and use domain dossier, we see that the domain doesn't actually exist, or if it existed, potentially when it was registered is very fresh. So that's an indicator that this was not necessarily a legitimate email. We're looking into other indicators. So, what else can we deduce from here? Well, we actually are going to go back to the message analyzer and look into the message ID. So the message ID, remember when I said that should be referenced with the from? Well, it doesn't match. It's equifaxnotification.com, but the actual sender source looks like fish test before, which is our phishing simulation platform. So in here, the received headers, it gives the life cycle of the email. Where did it come from? Where was it received? And stuff like that. So we see that the submitting host is not necessarily listed in this example, but the receiving host was fishtestnotbefore.com. We're seeing that the postfix was the actual SMTP. We see that the address is fish test. We see that then he went to Google. From Google, he went into Outlook. From Outlook, it was processed and it ended up on the end user, in the end user inbox. Okay. So looking through the example, finding the handles here. So we're going to look into the forefront anti-spam report header. So spam confidence level, -1. if you look into spam confidence level, -1, spam confidence level, non-spam, coming from a safe sender, safe recipient. So what that means in this case is that we whitelisted this sender. And why? It's part of our phishing campaign. So -1, this was whitelisted. If this is whitelisted and it's known malicious, you need to look into your actually whitelisting rules. The next thing we look in here is we have the spam filtering verdict, SKN and NLI. SKN and NLI. So looking through our reference here, SKN and NLI. Well, was not listed in any reputation list, not listed in reputation, and SKI is another indicator that it was non-SKN, not malicious. Bulk complaint 0, phishing confidence 0. That's a pretty good indicator that it was really a phishing simulation, so it was malicious, but it was contained, it was planned, the organization knew about it. So with SPF pass, we see that 209, if you look up this address in domain this year, we're going to see that it's coming from Google. And Google was authorized to send on behalf of the university. The received SPF, if this fails, there is a discrepancy, potential spoofing indicator. X received, this is who was received from. The received SPF also passed. So the received SPF and received SPF in both occasions from mail to mail system, it needs to be passed. The return path, if you compare, so it's PTS bounces no before, matches the organization. So we know that it was sent from the no before, but at the same time look at the from. So the from here, Equifax, is different than we have the particular return path. Okay, the return path is the sometimes the reply to also. We see the XPHP originating script. We see that it was a script. Again, the message ID, the reply to, in this case, that was spoofed. We see that when it's a phishing simulation, usually has the X phish test email header to indicate that this was a phishing. The anti-spam report, it looks like it was passed. The X Microsoft Exchange diagnostics. So URI scan, so this was all whitelisted. BCL 0, the phishing confidence level is 0. So the bulk is 0, the phishing confidence is 0. This is a legitimate email or whitelisted, as in our case. X Exchange SLP, there's potentially malicious, but it was actually whitelisted. The SCL, -1. So again, looking through these indicators, we can paint a picture that yes, this was a malicious from the perspective of an end user, but from an analyst, this was planned, staged phishing simulation that originated from the actual organization. You're not going to know these details unless you look through the header information.